Okay, before we crack on with doing any restringing, we need to have some tools that we, use. First of all, of course, you're gonna need some strings. Now we covered that in our purchasing, so I hope that you've got some strings that you think are gonna work out well for you. If not, hey, just go and get some more. Again, like I said, remember, go for the lighter strings, and if you've got a classical, go for less tension, as Lockie from Holden Hill Music had talked about. So yeah, hopefully you've got yourself a packet of strings. What else you'll need? Little snippers. If you're using steel strings, you'll find out why you're going to need these soon. It's going to neaten everything up. You don't need the entire string to be on the tuning peg. And these cool guys. So these are just little tuning winderers, good-ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-bingers. They're really inexpensive, a couple of bucks each. They are super readily available and they will save you a whole lot of time. And we'll go into some of the neat little tricks you can have with one of those. So yeah, strings, a tuning winder or a winding string winder, winder-ring-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a, and some snippers. Right, let's crack on, shall we? We're going to go straight into doing some nylon string restringing. Okay, we'll start off with our nylon string guitar, our classical guitar, great beginner guitar. This is how we do it. So if you've got a ball on the end of your string, this is going to make things particularly easy and rather quick. All you need to do is just ease the ball up through the bridge and then we'll go up to the headstock. But if you're after a challenge or you're a bit of a purist like myself, then what we'll do is we'll tie it in just like these are all done. So what we do is we've got our string all set up, ready to go. Just ease it through the little hole that's in there that lines up with the string that you're changing. And give it about 2 to 3 inches out of there. Roll it over the top, in on itself, just like so. Leave this a little bit loose because you want to go back in again underneath itself another 2 or 3 times. We'll go probably 2 with this one. 2 I find is just a nice even number and OCD in your way. So you just pull it in on itself twice, makes a little loop like that, and then just tie it up. If you've ever gone fishing, you've probably done something similar like with your fishing line. And that's as simple as it is. Some people like to put the extra length of string underneath another one. I don't particularly, doesn't bother me. It's not too messy and it doesn't hurt your fingers. Cool, so just tighten that up a little bit, just let it ease in and settle in there. And we'll move on up to the headstock. So as we move up here, just give it another bit of a tighten as you see fit. And what we're going to do is get this end of the string, pass it through the tuning peg hole and bring it back up again through the top and back around again on itself. This way it's going to tighten in without too much hassle and it's not going to actually slip when you start tuning it up and tightening up the string itself. So just getting it in there. It can be a bit finicky, bit fiddly. Right, as it's come out, just pull it in. Simple as that. Right, so we'll cut away now to a different shot. What do you know? And we'll tighten it up and give it a tune. All right, so we've got our string and we've chucked it in on through the bridge and all the rest. Now what we need to do is just start tightening it up. Now one way I like to do it is just chuck it between your legs like so and get your fantastic winder and wind it in. Now again, I'm trying to wind the string towards the center of the headstock, not towards the machine heads themselves, and just keep going. Now the reason that these windy things are so good is due to the fact that it just saves you so much time, and why not? And they're not expensive, a couple of dollars. Right, as you start feeling it tighten up, line it up into the nut where it's meant to be. Just keep it nice and tight there. And that's simple. So that's it, really. Well, after you've done that, give it a nice tug. You'll notice that, especially with the nylon strings, they are quite flexible. You need to give them a good stretch to really get in there. So you're just tightening up. And that's about it. Alright, I will get onto the tuning part very shortly, but first of all we are going to go and continue on with changing our strings on other guitars. This time an acoustic 6-string, steel 6-string guitar. Cool, so I'll just leave that there for now and let that stretch out. Right, be back in a second. Alright, now we're going to move on to our 6-string steel acoustic guitar. As it is, if you've broken the string, it's going to be careful that you don't drop the bits of broken bit. If it's broken off down at the bridge, it may fall through and make an annoying noise. Now, I've got this cool thing here. It's got this amazing little divot there in the right there. And what's good about that is it can get in under the tuning peg and pull the guy out like that. Look at that. See you later, little fella. Right, so we keep this handy, don't drop it anywhere, you know, because if you drop them, no way you're going to put your string in. Get your string out, yay! Unravel it. Now your tuning peg, not your tuning peg, your actual peg, it goes in, obviously in there, and it may have a little groove in the middle, cut out of the middle of it. What I like to do is get my ball, and just put it in like that, so that little hole's poking up, and just to see, it feels a bit neater and nicer. And line up your string with that little cutout, and just fits in good and proper. Give it a bit of a tighten, a bit of a tug, and of course, we'll move on up to the headstock. Right, so we've got our headstock here. Give it another little tighten, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to cut the end off. If you've seen my YouTube, you'll already know about this, but for those who haven't, you've got this awesome little distance between each of the tuning pegs. And what I like to do, makes things easier, just rolls, tightens up neater, just looks really good, and I think it's just the perfect amount of extra string length that you need. Is if I'm going to be, say, using, well, restringing the E string, I'll cut it off at where the A is. Because I'm doing the A string, I'll cut it off where the D is. Right, so the D, if you've got changing that, get up the end of the headstock and just give it a little bit more and cut it off there. But as I've said, I'm doing the A, so here goes. That's it. All you got to do, cut it right off. And lining up string with the tuning peg there, give it a little bit, maybe about a ½ centimetre out, and just ever so gently start to tighten up that string. Just wind up that tuning peg there. What you want to do is you want to guide this string over the top of this extra little bit hanging out. And also notice the way that these are strung. So I've tightened them, so go around. Whichever way you're looking at it would be left or right, obviously, just because it's neat, and I like neatness, I guess, and it just looks good. Just looks good. I'm waffling now, aren't I? What a jerk. Right, so as I've wound up over the top of this little extra bit of wire hanging out, this little bit of string, we guide it underneath. Again, so what you're doing is you're tightening up on itself. Right, so I'll leave that there and we'll cut away to the next shot where we'll be getting the string fully tensioned and giving it a bit of a tune. Right, so we've now put our string in and we're ready to go. So same old thing, same as we did with the nylon string, is we're just going to wind it up. I've stuck it between my legs like that. When you're actually tuning and tightening these up, I don't recommend you put it up to your face. This is okay because there's no tension in this. Keep it away from your face, kids, because it'll poke you in the eye. So as you've seen, and as I've mentioned, try and have it wound in so the string is facing towards the center of the headstock. Once it starts to tighten up, put it in the nut nice and gently like that. One issue that you'll find with these is if you haven't pushed the pin in hard enough, that'll pop out a little bit. Don't worry, it's not going to fling back in your face. Most of the time it'll just pop out just a touch and it'll wedge itself back up in. So basically what these are doing is inside the little hole there, there's the ball of your string, and that's the pin, and the pin sits in, and the ball pushes up and sort of wedges that pin up into the wood itself and holds it there nice and hard. And that's pretty much it for that. We're going to cover a little bit about electric guitars. Now, electric guitars, the only difference between changing strings and electric guitar is how the bridges are made, because there's so many different types of bridges. I won't talk about floating bridges because that's, if you have a floating bridge on your electric guitar as a beginner, I recommend you probably put that one away for a while and get yourself a nice, super basic, get the foundations, get the fundamentals sorted first. Right, so that's that strung. I guess now we're going to have to tune it, aren't we? What I'm going to do though is, with the magic of TV and the magic of video, I'm going to change all of these strings and they're all going to be completely brand new, and we're going to tune this guy from nothing, from the start, as if you would if you were doing it yourself. Right, so I'm going to get you on to showing you the electric stuff, but while you're watching that, I'm going to have these all restrung and then we'll crack on with tuning. So here I am with my hollow-bodied Ibanez guitar. As you see, that this bridge is quite different, it's quite unique. This is basically based on the Brigsby, I think it is, style bridge, which is it's on a spring, so you get that kind of surfy rock, rockabilly type of sound. This bridge is quite different also, as in, as you roll it, the strings basically, they roll around and there's tiny little pegs that poke out, and you put the hole of the string, the ball end of the hole, into that, and it rolls over the top up to this bridge here, which is also on rollers. And the reason that that's on rollers is because if you're doing, you know, like all that, then the string itself doesn't sort of get caught on that part of the bridge and it rolls along, so it tries to keep it in tune. So the basic premise of this one obviously is you just make sure you've got the right strings in the right spot. You put the ball end through that little peg, roll it over the top, and as you move up to the neck, it's all exactly, the headstock and the neck, it's all exactly the same as you would if you have an acoustic guitar. We'll move on to my Strat copy, which is again a little bit different. I won't show the headstock of this one, just due to the fact that you've already seen it basically exactly the same. It's the same technique, the way that you roll it on. The same distances I like to use when I put the string on, and also with the headstock, it's got that extra length there that I use for the D and the G string when I put them on also. So that's just to show you a different type of bridge, and we're moving on to the next one. Right, so this is my Strat copy. It's not an actual Fender, and again you can see that this bridge is again another different beast from the Ibanez and from the steel string acoustic, and it's far cry from the nylon string. This one here, the strings, they come up from the back and roll in through the top. If you can see these little holes along here, the string goes down in that hole and then comes back up the top, over through here, and then up to the headstock. You will also notice that these have got little screws and they're all over the place in different spots. If you have a steel string acoustic guitar, you might see the saddle has, usually on the B string, a bit of a cutaway that sort of adds a little bit of a different length to how far away, obviously, the string sits from the bridge to the nut. And this is kind of like that same idea, and that's to help with intonation. Now, intonation is basically ensuring that the string will stay in tune all the way up the fretboard. So don't fret over that right now. That was a pun intended. What we have to worry about is just putting the strings in for the moment. If you speak to the music shop owner, or if you have your own guitar technician that you can take it to, ask them to make sure that the intonation is right, and they'll look after it for you. It's quite an advanced type of thing to get into, and I don't want you worrying about that just yet. If your guitar's set up properly from the get-go, it'll stay in tune and the intonation should be pretty good for an extended period of time. Alright, so moving up to the headstock now. Okay, so you can see this headstock is another different beast altogether. It has a lot of the same business. So you got your machine heads, your tuning pegs, and nut. And then there's this weird sort of bit of metal poking out. Now through, especially with steel string, not necessarily with nylon strings, but definitely with steel string and acoustic guitars, through the neck there's a thing called a truss rod. And it's a piece of metal that goes through. And as your guitar ages, or if it's prone to excessive heat or cold, the wood can bend a little bit. So the truss rod, it just tries to help keep the neck in shape. Now, do not touch the truss rod if you don't know what you're doing with it. Give it to your guitar tech or the shopkeeper that you bought your guitar from, and they'll look after that for you. Even I don't like touching that thing because I'm actually scared I'm going to break it or put the thing out of tune forever. So yeah, just so you're aware, you'll see also on some acoustic guitars and electric guitars, they'll have a cover that goes over the top, and that's the cover to get into the truss rod. Enough about that. So you'll notice with this one that the tuning pegs are sort of spaced a little bit differently because they're all bunched in on this one side. So if you're going to do a string change on this one, or if you've got something similar to this, instead of going from one peg to the next, go to 2 pegs different, and then that should be a good, decent length for you to wind the strings on. Now the technique of winding the strings on is exactly the same as the acoustic guitars I showed you before. Get that wee little bit that's poking out over the top once and then back underneath so as it ties in on itself. Another thing that's interesting about this headstock are these 2 little metal parts called trees, and what they do is they hold the strings in at a separate angle. So because all of the strings are on the one side of this headstock, they all have a different angle as they come off the nut, and at that angle can affect the tuning and the sustain of the guitar. So they put these trees in here at precise points to ensure that the angle of the strings as it comes into the headstock is relatively similar across the entire headstock itself. So when you restring them, obviously you can go straight up there, but before you start tensioning and tuning it up, make sure you put those strings in its pegs as it is. Now they don't probably all look like that, there might be a little like a T thing, but that's about all there is to say about that. Again, as I said, the technique of putting them on and tuning them up is exactly the same as an acoustic, and as I said, 2 distance, so that's about roughly what that is from the high E there, and that's the only one you have to really worry about as far as that distance goes, but good way to get your strings sorted out. Alright, rightio, I've changed my strings. They sound horrible, but they sound nice because they're nice and clean and crispy strings. So, how do we tune it? Easy, quite easy. There are a whole bunch of different ways that you can do it. I have a couple of my tuning friends here that I, have had around all over the place. I've got my Boss chromatic tuner. This thing's a tank. I use that on stage all the time. This is the very first tuner I ever owned. It's a quartz guitar tuner. You actually have to pick the strings that you want to tune, and a little analog dial just sort of gets up into the center there. And I have my clip-on one. Now, these are quite cheap. These are available everywhere. And there's also some phone apps that you can use that are also guitar tuners. They're okay. They're not the best. Something physical is a whole lot better. So we'll tune it now with one of these, because in pretty much all cases, everybody ends up with one of these. These are everywhere. They are so cheap, they're so available, and they're so reliable. So that's what we're going to do. If you do end up having one of these, however, you're going to need a battery for it, and what you'll do is you'll hit the string and it'll line up and it'll come up green. In almost every case except for these ones, which is dead center, you'll see that, they will show you whether or not you're in or out. Oh, looks like I'm in the green. Right, so this guy here sort of sits as is, and as we, what's we got there? F sharp. Turn it down. There we go. To E. Now we're in D sharp territory. Here we go. And tune it up to E. So what I prefer to do is tune down first and then tune back up. That maintains the tension on the tuning peg and keeps it in tune a bit longer. And we're moving on. A bit out as well, a bit too high. So we're tuning it up to A. Cool. And it's just as simple as this, just going through each one systematically, nice and gently, getting close. Now you notice that I'm not getting my head anywhere near the headstock, so a little bit high. Right, so they are all in tune. Now let's go back and start again. What do you know? It's out of tune. The reason for that is as you're actually tensioning everything up, the neck will shift slightly. Also, they are made of metal. Metal isn't really designed to stay exactly in its original state all the time. It kind of moves around a bit. That's okay. That's totally normal. Then don't stress about that. What we're really worried about here is just going over and over and over so they get to the point where they're tensioned enough that they stay as in tune as possible. So when you've tuned everything, go back and retune it again. In the case of nylon strings, it'll take a couple of days for all of the strings to settle. They are nylon, so they will, it's like a plastic. It'll just stretch and stretch and stretch until it can't stretch any further at its optimum tension. So you really have to give them a bit of a pull on the strings like that after you've restrung it, before you tune it, do that again, tune it, and it'll just constantly go out of tune for maybe a day or two, and then it'll settle itself into place. One thing that I do like to do with the steel strings, as I just did with that, is give it a little bit of a pull, not too much. You don't want to go crazy on it, and that just helps it sort of settle into place. It also settles everything down here at the pins and settles everything up the top. So enjoy your tuning. That's pretty much all you need to do for it, is just to go over and over and over until you get to a point where they are all in tune. Now I'm going to crack on and show you how to do it by ear and by hand. Righto, so we're back and I've got pretty much one string in tune. So let's just say, for example, you go, oh great, it's working, and then you go for the next one and you think, oh no, what's happened? Why has my battery's died? Right, don't fret. Easy way to tune by ear is you get the 5th fret of the string and you listen for it to sound the same. Now, one way you can hear it, if you're not used to listening to this type of stuff, is you'll hear kind of waves, and you'll hear go whichever way you get the less amount of waves and they sound the same. And so kind of a low, it's just out a little bit, and that's the phase of the vibrations aligning with each other as you're coming up and getting them into phase and in tune. And you go from the 5th fret, from the E to the A, which will get the D. Right, that was pretty close. And then the 5th fret and the D for the G string. Ooh, just about in. And then you go from the 4th fret of the G string for the B. Not sure if you heard it sort of just ease up and sort of sound the same. That's a bit out. Like I said, go down and then come back up again. Still sounds out, right? Now let's get at least one of these into tune, and we'll make sure. Oh, there we go. That's good. Right. So that's one way to do it. So 5th, 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 4th, 5th. Or you could do harmonics. Now harmonics are pretty tricky to do. It's kind of like you hit the string, but you don't actually push on the fretboard. So it's a fine line, and it'll take you a little time to get used to this, to get that sound. Now I find that doing the harmonic way, while you're listening to it, it teaches you how to do harmonics, which are cool. So that's just another technique, and we'll cover that further on down the track. But as an introduction to this, what we're doing is going from the 5th to the 7th. And that's all the way up to the D and the G. And of course, because the way that this is all strung and the notes are laid out, we're not doing 5th fret on the G. So I'll show you how to get to the B at the end. So what we're doing is we're hitting the 5th fret of the low E string to the 7th fret of the A string. And that sounds pretty good to me. Let's put one out a little bit. And then go on the 5th fret of the A string to the 7th fret of the D string. Now, if it's sort of not working for you, just slowly and gently, just ever so gently touch the top of the string. You don't have to push in at all. It's like you're just touching it, literally just touching the string, and then you hit it and you'll get that sound. And you don't have to do anything after that. And that's tuned it in. Right, so we've gone up to the G string. Now the B, go 7th fret of the E. And that's actually a B note. And then the 7th fret of the A is an E too. But if you're getting really good at your harmonics, you can do the B and the E, 5th and 7th. But they're not as loud. They're because it's high vibrations, the volume isn't as loud and it doesn't travel as far, so it's a little bit harder to hear. So 7th fret for the B, 7th fret for the E. Cool. Now our guitar is in tune, we're ready to start playing.